first thing I say is, okay, we have 30 minutes or whatever the time limit is. Here are the 3 things I have to get out of this meeting. We're not leaving this room till I get those 3 things. And then everything else falls into place under that, because especially when you're in a meeting in a professional situation, the conversation, people like to hear themselves talk, they go all over the place, but they don't stay on point. And one of the things about flying is if you're not on point, you're dead.
Today's guest is my friend AJ Wilder, an architect, entrepreneur, world-ranked aerobatic pilot, and co-founder of the Figure One Foundation, which helps young pilots reach their dreams. From building a thriving architecture firm to performing stunts at over 200 miles per hour within an invisible 1,000-meter box, achieving up to 14 Gs, AJ's relentless drive to conquer new domains is nothing short of extraordinary. I want to pause on this point. 14 Gs is equal to 14 times your body weight and can cause serious injury and loss of consciousness in an instant. 9 Gs is what fighter pilots can traditionally withstand with specialized suits and normally only for brief periods of time. But what's most striking is the juxtaposition between his unwavering tenacity and steady presence. It's like the bear in the background of this video, symbolizing his strength, resilience, and relentless pursuit of mastery while he remains unruffled and self-assured under pressure. As a side note to listeners, the video is worth watching since a portion of the discussion involves commentary on shared screen of his gravity-defying aerial maneuvers. AJ also discusses his ability to enter a state of flow, optimize his mental and physical performance, and maintain clarity through meditation and biometrics. I'm excited to share this wonderful conversation with one of the most generous, positive people I know. Let's start the show. AJ Wilder, thanks for being on. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thanks
Welcome.
for calling.
We've been trying to schedule this for a little bit of back and forth. So I know you carved off a little bit on March Madness Friday, which is also I'm grateful for.
Yeah, hurry up because I got to get my bets in.
I know. We got to get in the bracket. So you've been a well-regarded part of the real estate community for many years, highly loved. I want to talk about Wolcott and you acquiring Wolcott. I want to talk about some of your side businesses on the way to doing that. I also want to talk about some of your charity work, but I want to kick this off with your flying because I think people get an idea that you are a pilot and that you do some crazy shit, but I don't think they understand the gravity of what you're doing. No pun intended there. I literally don't think they understand the danger and what the acumen is. So I'm hoping that if you can kick it off, just tell us what you're involved with and how you got into it. And then I've got 100 questions to follow.
Yeah, sure. It is a very dangerous sport. And to your point, we're flying, anywhere from the surface level to 300 feet at over 200 miles an hour. And we have to keep the sequences when we're competing in 1,000 meter by 1,000 meter box. So things happen really fast. It's unfortunate. I can count 32 plus of my friends that I've lost in the last, call it 10 years. It's a real high ratio of people getting hurt. That ground comes up quick and it's not forgiving. You can't hit the repeat button. It's, so I've been backing up. I've been flying for about 30 years. I actually got into flying like a lot of things in my life. I was out and hooked up with a friend and he's like, hey, you want to go flying? I'm like, yeah. And the person who I flew with, I would not say is one of the smarter people in the world that I went to high school with. So I'm like, well, shoot, if he can be a pilot, I could be a pilot. Why not? So I started back when I was in New York. And of course, I picked one of the harder airports to start out with. It's an airport, Farmingdale, Long Island, and it's wedged between Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark. So a lot of stuff happens really fast. And I figured, I'll get this pilot license thing. Then I started flying. So that was airplanes. Then I started flying. I did that. And of course, I was trying to be an architect at the same time. So, poor, no money, splitting time with another student. Left there when I came out here in 97. So back there, I had my private and commercial, came out here, realized because of the Marine layer, you can't fly unless you have an instrument rating. Got my instrument rating. Then I was like, well, I might as well get my flight instructor rating in case I ever want to teach. I did that. And then I got my ATP, which essentially is the highest level of a pilot's license you can get. Then I got bored. And a buddy of mine said, hey, you can fly planes upside down. Go out and do this upset training recovery course. I'm like, really? So I went out there and did it. And I was deathly ill for the first, call it 2 weeks of training out there. I literally would land. And from being I was so afraid of being upside down. I'd hold on as we would go inverted. And he'd be like, dude, like, let go. Like, don't hold on. Like, and I'm thinking, no way, man. I'm not letting the seatbelt like hold me in place. So did that, had a really bad motion sickness for a long time. And then I started to get into it. And another friend had said, hey, why don't you try to compete? So I bought my first plane, a Great Lakes, and started competing in the lower categories. There's 5 categories. And went out to the first contest and got thrown out of the contest because I flew the entire sequence on the wrong axis. It was a loop was the first figure. And in the loop, I did a clover leaf and I flew the entire sequence the wrong way. And the committee came together and they said, and I had a safety pilot because I didn't know what I was doing. And the committee said, well, we can't let you fly the other 2 flights. And it was rough. So I was like, hey, whatever. This is cool. I got the experience. And the person who was on the committee, the head of the committee, said, oh, don't worry about it. There's been national and world champions that have done this. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, I'm coming back and I'm coming at you. And he was in the advanced category, it was much higher. And I was like, I'm coming back and I'm going to nail you to a post and I'm going to beat you. And I'm not only going to beat you, but I'm going to work my way up. I'm going to be nationally ranked, and then I'm going to be world ranked. And, just a lot of hard work. I had a lot of good coaches. I had a Russian coach that worked with me for several years, a French coach that has been working with me. And about 4 years in, I was climbing up the categories, and a buddy of mine said, hey, why don't you go try out for nationals? And go fly nationals. I was like, all right. Flew nationals twice. And then I was like, yeah, this is really where it's at. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of competitors. And one of the guys was like, well, why don't you try to make the team, the advanced team? So I was like, all right, well, it seems like a big thing. So I ended up making the advanced team and then went to Worlds because it's every other year, went to Worlds and did pretty good. And I was like, this is where it's at. It's the best pilots in the world. The best 60 pilots in the world are going to go head to head for 4 flights and you're flying sequences you've never flown before. It's a really interesting process. After the first flight, which is the free known, everyone picks figures. And then you have that night, you put all the figures together in sequences. And then you can pick from any sequence, but then you have to go out and fly it, which sounds like, okay, no big deal. You go out and fly it. But, there's a lot of components to it. You have the wind component that you have to deal with and you have to wind correct because, again, it's a 1,000-meter box. And then you have the density altitude component, i.e. you don't want to hit the ground, right? So the air gets thinner when it's hotter. So you have to figure out your altitudes because there's 7 judges on the line and they're all judging you. It's kind of like figure skating. They're all judging you. Each figure has a K factor, which means a hardness factor. And then they give you a score of 0 to 10 on that figure. And then it adds up and then you get a presentation score. So, I mean, it's pretty interesting. This year is tryouts for next year, which will be, the Worlds will be actually in New York, upstate New York. So super psyched about that. And so tryouts will be in September. So this will be my 8th U.S. team. If I make this team, it'll be my 9th team I've made. So I've been competing, doing this a long time. I have that world. And then because of the foundation, I never wanted to sit at a table and have someone more qualified than me. So I decided, this was a couple of years ago, I decided, well, I'm going to go get all my helicopter ratings. Same thing, got my private, commercial, ATP. And then I'm like, well, I might as well get my flight instructor ratings. Got my flight instructor ratings, my CFI and double I in helicopter. And then I was like, well, what else can I do? So I did the same thing in glider, got my commercial and then got my flight instructor rating. And I figured, okay, there's anytime I'm talking about the foundation, which I'm super passionate about, now I can sit pretty much with any pilot, et cetera. And typically I won't come across someone that has more experience than me. Man, I'm over 10,000 hours now, which is what a lot of commercial pilots are when they retire, the guys that do this for a living. So it's super cool.
And you've never flown a commercial plane professionally?
No, I mean, no is the short answer. I'd probably be bored out of my shorts. I mean, that was one of the things that got me about flying, because it's become so automated that I was like, this is kind of boring. And that's why I got into aerobatics. And then once I got into aerobatics, I was like, wow, like you can take an airplane. We just modified another modification of mine. And now if I really get on it, I'm pulling 14.5 from horizontal to vertical. So, that's 14 and a half G's. So you take your body weight times 14 and a half G's. That's what's going through the bottom of the plane. And then when I'm inverted and I push up, it's anywhere between 8 and 9 G's. So 9 times your body weight is sucking you out of the airplane.
What would be the average G's most people would pass out at?
If you get in a race car and it's a long-term, just take race cars. I mean, they're 2.5 G's. There's a whole physical way of keeping the blood in your head or out of your head so your eyes don't explode, basically. I mean, if you think about it, in the beginning of the season, I always get broken capillaries around here. I'll look like a raccoon because, your capillaries, just like anything else, you've got to work them to have them accurate. And an average person walking around's only got 1 G on them. Hence your body weight, right? So when you add more than that, your body doesn't like it, but B, you have to work your way up into it. So it's, on a training flight during the season, I'll do 2 to 3 training flights a day, and there's 600 to 800 calories per training flight. And the training flight's only 25 minutes, but your body is trying to keep the organs where they're supposed to be. So you're using muscles you normally don't use. So it's intense.
Are you monitoring all of your metrics? Your heart rate, your blood pressure while you're flying? Is that something that gets monitored?
More in the beginning. I mean, now I'm so acclimated to it, I can tell by certain signs. There's been 2 times when I pulled myself to sleep, which is like watching the TV and the TV goes in and then you're out, which is really interesting. I mean, for both reasons, I was dehydrated and I didn't pick up on the signs early enough. And it's a really strange thing. I was on a downline. I pulled out. It was a long pull into a loop with a bunch of stuff on it. And as I was coming around the pole, instead of lightening up on the G, I just kept the G on. And my whole field of vision came in and then went poop and disappeared. And the thing is, when you pull yourself to sleep or you over G yourself, the first thing that comes back is your ears. So your hearing, which is really bizarre. So picture you're in the moment, you're looking at the ground, you're pulling away from the ground, you're looking at the sky, and then all of a sudden it's black. And it's like someone knocked you out. And then a couple seconds later, you start to hear like, oh, I'm in an airplane, but then you can't tell if you're sleeping or if you're awake. And the last things that comes back is your eyes. So then all of a sudden, you can see what's going on, but you're in that I just woke up phase, like waking up from sleeping. And the interesting thing about it is, like in that particular case, I was inverted. I rolled upright, and one of the coaches on the ground was like, all right, bring it in. Let's go. You okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. So as I'm coming into land, I roll inverted as I'm coming down to land. And the coach was like, AJ, knock it off. Like, you're inverted. And like, I could not tell if I was right side up or upside down. So that part's very dangerous.
What's the timeline in that scenario between when you clock out and when you come to again, at least auditorially?
Typically it's 6 to 8 seconds. What needs to happen is the G has to come off of you basically depleted your brain of blood and oxygen. So the blood and oxygen have to get back, and then your brain has to kind of recalculate all your gyros to get them right. So okay, I'm right side up, I'm out in a field, whatever, and then you have to get your way about you. It's not something you want to do. And the problem is you get into higher categories, and we're low to the ground. So although we have to wear a parachute, parachutes don't work unless you're above 1,500 feet. Because if you jump, and I've had to consider this a couple times, and you're not at 1,500 feet, we had a guy in the desert, he popped out, jumped, he was at 1,200 feet, the canopy half opened, and when he hit the ground, it cut him in half. And about 15 minutes later, he died. So it's rough. It's really, really rough.
So what do you do? So how long are the seasons typically? I mean, is it time off, then time back on again?
Yeah. I mean, I try to knock off from like November to the end of January. And then I start slow, get my G tolerance back up so you don't hurt. You'll hear pilots talk about the wobblies, which essentially the crystals in your ear that should be on the bottom of your ear get to the top of your ear, and then you get vertigo. And once you get that, it's very difficult to back up and get rid of it. And that can be career ending for airshow pilots and everything. So I'll start.
How do you mitigate that?
Huh?
How do you mitigate that?
There's been a lot of science about where you put your chin when you're doing high rate turns or, rolls. I have my seat actually pushes me past vertical. So I'm not vertical to the plane. I'm actually ahead of it. So my ears are never 90 degrees to the rotation, which is the best spot to be, right? As you get further away from 90, the arm gets less, so you have less pulling. But that's a dangerous thing, because once you get the wobblies, trying to land an airplane, it's damn near impossible.
And when's peak competition season?
So, the worlds are always in the summer for us. So there's a lead up to that. Nationals are in and about right after that in the fall. And then, we start shutting down everything the end of October because the plane usually has so much maintenance that needs to get done on it. From during the season, you break stuff, you put temporary fixes on it, but then you got to go back in and tear it apart and fix it.
So we're in the middle of March, which means you're sort of in prime workout conditioning shape. I'm curious, what does that entail? What does your day look like? What are you doing to stay in shape? And I would like, if you can, talk about what do you do for your mind? I mean, I think your body is one part of it, but there's a level of focus that's required in these circumstances that I would suggest is unlike any other endeavor out there. I mean, outside of being an astronaut, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, so something I started doing about 4.5 years ago was I was working out wrong. So I'd go in the gym and I would do, pyramid work. I'd do moderate, heavy, benching and everything else. And we got a new coach and he's like, we're changing this. You guys are going to do explosive stuff because that's what happens in the plane. So instead of doing, 4 sets of 225 on the bench and trying to get 10, we're going to bring that to, call it 340, and you're only going to get 2 or 3. And so it was all explosive exercise. So that was a big difference. And when I put my head through the canopy, he was big on building up your neck like a wrestler. So a lot of neck curls, a lot of body weight on the neck. And I think that's why I didn't get paralyzed when my head went through the canopy. Because when I went and got the MRI and the doctors were looking at it, because I lost feeling in my hands, the doctor said, you know, you should have, it was like running into a wall at 20 miles an hour with your head, and your neck absorbed all that. And that's what saved me, because theoretically I should have broken my neck, and then I obviously would have been screwed, and I would have ended up in the ground. But so neck is big, you know, lower core is big. I think a lot of us do sit-ups, and that works your upper part of your stomach, but that doesn't help you from a blood standpoint. You know, when we start pushing, like before I G up for a pull to keep the blood in my head, I start with my toes, of all things. So you really have to ratchet down your toes, you have to tighten up your calves, and you work your way all the way through your core till you get up to your neck. So there's just a lot of muscles that if I took you out flying and I pulled really hard, I mean, you'd be out. And it's just because you don't know how to tighten up. You know, a lot of the guys like the Blue Angels and them, they all have G suits on. So the water in the G suit is supplementing their blood, you know, to keep it where it should be. We don't have that. That's one of the things we're not allowed to have any of that when we compete. So we have to train our body to hold all that, you know, during that time. But, you know, the gym is big, you know, hitting it an hour and just doing heavy exercises, doing a lot of lower core work. It's amazing how important your legs are in this sport. And we tend to always work our upper body out, but not as much our lower body. So leg stuff, a lot of workouts, bare feet with your toes extended, so you have a good base. And what that does is it strengthens your toes. So like when I'm doing curls and stuff, I'm actually doing it on a quarter ball. So I'm actually working on balance while I'm doing stuff like that. So a lot of those type of exercises. And then from a mental standpoint, you know, there's all different theories about how to do this. I work with a group called Peak Brain, and it's a passive way of training your brain. And they've done a lot of white paper on this, which, like, if you have a stroke, it fixes it rewires the dead spots of your brain. So the snowboarders were really where it came out of, the professional snowboarders, and it allowed them to hyper focus in. So, you know, what they do is they look and see what damage you have to begin with, and then they try to activate those damage or workaround areas. Like I had a lot of concussions from sports when I was younger. So trying to fix that first and then work on hyper focus. And it's interesting, you stare at a screen, and as your brain does the right thing, it tiles the screen until you make a full picture. So it's very bizarre, but really effective.
So is it electrodes on your head while in sort of conditioning sort of those neural pathways as you start to use your eyes?
It's passive, right? So you can't like focus on it and it'll make the tiles go. Like when your brain does it right, it hears an audible sound and a new tile appears. It's really, really interesting because it's the stuff we don't tap into.
Sure.
You know, when you're flying, right, the challenge is you're in fight or flight mode, or what is it? It's flight, fight, or freeze, right?
Freeze.
So you definitely don't want to freeze. You'll die. You have to apply yourself, which means I know exactly what my heart rate needs to be. I know where my blood sugar level needs to be. You don't want to be too high, too low, because if you're in the plane and you're doing this, it's a mess. And, you know, we're flying with precision. So if we pull up and we do a 3/4 roll and we're over by 10 degrees, we get penalized for that. So precision is key. And then you have to put that roll in the center of the line. So any length after or before that, you know, within that line, you get penalized for. And as you get up, like where I am in the unlimited category, there's so much stuff going on each figure, which I sent you a couple of
we're going to get into that
things. I mean, it's super intense.
So how are you? I'm curious. What is your heart rate typically? Where's that ideal
It's
frequency
funny
for
you
you?
say that because I had to do a stress test and I cannot, it takes, and it's just because I've conditioned my normal heart rate, right, is 110/80. It's right where it should be. I cannot, under extreme stress in the airplane, I cannot get it over 130. And it's 130 no matter what I do. I really like when they put me on the treadmill for the stress test, the incline has to be really high and they have to really push it for me to get in the 40s. And it's just because my heart is so conditioned with being consistent in the pump. And nor do I want to be 110 when I go to fly. I want to be about 118 is sort of my sweet spot. And then, if you have external things happening, something's broken on the plane as you're getting ready to fly, that might bring it up to like, mid 120s, but typically it's not high. It's not where it should be. I mean, if I took you out, I could get you to probably 155, 160 in a couple
Easy,
seconds.
easy. Yeah, that's incredible. Have you measured your HRV?
No, it's interesting that you talk about that because that's been discussion about, really monitoring that. We have so much technology now to be able to look at that and utilize that. A lot of what we're doing when we fly is you have the obvious factor, right? You don't want to die, but you have to maintain because it's like the worlds are over a course of 2 weeks. So you may fly on day
Mm-hmm.
one and not fly until day 5. So for those 4 days, I'll go back to my hotel room like this past one when we were in Poland. And in the background noise, I'll have the video of me flying. So I'm hearing the airplane engine all 4 days. So I'm conditioned to it. I'll tend to, in a hotel room, instead of just sitting up straight, like working, I'll try to make myself put my feet on the bed and be upside down essentially. My preseason training, I actually hang upside down and try to read really boring stuff because it works the capillaries in your eyes and you start to get used to the pain of having blood pressure high in your head. And I do that training and that seems to be super effective.
Well, we can hear it in your voice, and it's in the way you carry yourself too. But there's two components here that I'm really interested in how it applies to business, and then I want to transition over to the photos and go through a video so that you can walk us through it a little bit. But focus is certainly one of them, and I'm blanking on the word, but there's a tranquility to your presence, and I think putting yourself in those stressed environment so frequently and conditioning yourself. I'm curious what it's like, how you bring that into just run of the mill everyday situations that most people would get pretty amped up about.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things as I get older and I do compete more and more is, and I find myself doing this at high competitions, I'm actually taking in the experience, which so all of what I'm telling you, I've applied to business, right? So if I'm out in a competition and I'm actually enjoying nice sun, I'm looking at the surroundings, I'm enjoying the people. I never did that when I got into competition. I was, head down, focus, focus, focus. And then when you start to realize like, hey, life is short, and we've all known, those stories, I'm seeing it firsthand, right? That guys are getting killed right in front of me that I know, that I had relationships with, that I know their families. And when you realize that it's such a blessing to be able to enjoy this sport, enjoy it. And so taking that back to business, which is, a client calls and they're upset about something. And if you can take a step out of that moment and just take a deep breath. And this is like what I do before I go and fly, like before I dive into the box, I take 3 big breaths, hold it for a couple seconds, and it triggers the sense in your brain to say, it's going to be okay. And when I do that and I take those 3 deep breaths and I hold it, because I do a lot of meditation and other things when you're talking about for your brain, when I apply that to business, like I'm walking into potentially a contentious situation with a client on some complicated thing on the site, I take 3 breaths. I'm already grounded and I can actually detach myself from the situation. So I'm not emotionally attached to it. And the clarity that you see then, again, learning this from flying, the clarity you have where you can pull yourself out and look down and go, I got this. It totally changes the way you approach a situation.
Yeah, if we get time, I want to come back to the meditation component. But in the meantime, I'm going to screen share here.
I think the video we sent you is so this is some of the planes I'm flying.
So we've got to, let me prep this real quick. For those who are listening, we're going through a visual sharing. AJ, I'm going to go through a bunch of photos. I want you to talk us through it. And then there's a couple of plans, for lack of a better word. I don't know what they're called. And then we'll watch the video. So I'm going to let you talk through these, but let's jam through these little by little here. So what are these?
So the one on the left is one of the planes I fly with the team. The one on the right is one that I use for practice, and I also compete in. You'll see a bunch of video up of that. This is one of my hangars out in Santa Paula, and then you can see this is out in Tennessee training. A lot of the team goes out to Tennessee because it's centralized, and we train out there. This is over in Poland. You get a sense of how big the crowd is.
Absolutely.
That comes to see these. We were obviously on the stage and they were introducing us. So there's a lot of, in Europe, this is a much bigger sport than it is here.
Everybody seems to be standing at attention.
Yeah, they were just starting the whole program, but we were in the background. So I shot this because you get a sense of the square where everyone gathered. I mean, it's really cool.
Absolutely. That's
coming into land. They have grass strips over there. That's before I took off. One of the photographers shot it and was like, it was funny, before I closed the canopy, he goes, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Bring it."
There's some good AJ in badass poses here.
That one's actually out at Fox recently training. You can see the snow in the background. It's kind of cool.
We'll just sort of flip through these. You just stop me if there's anything in particular. We're going to go through some of your actual flights, and I want to talk to you about your state of mind during there. These are great.
Yeah, they're cool, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a great sport, and you can apply lessons learned in this to everything in life, which is great.
Well, that's what I think I find most fascinating. So there's 3 you sent. I don't know which one you want to, or 4. Well, this one is mind-blowing. It looks like hieroglyphics.
Good.
Which one do you want to go to?
The one with all the countries. Keep going. One more. So this is kind of cool. So we all sit in a room, and every team, and you can see the country that picked it. Every team picks a figure, and then you have to put all these figures together. It's 14 total. It's 10 base figures and then connector figures, and then you have to fly that. And if you go to the next one, you'll see what a sequence looks like. So that's a sequence that you have to fly that you've never flown before. So it gets really interesting.
How intuitive is this for you to internalize? Is this something that's relatively easy for you to see a few times and actually get to know, or is this something you got to study for days in advance?
Well, you don't have days. I mean, you're going to fly it the next day. So, there's like, if you go to my hotel room, one of the rooms, the entire perimeter has exactly what I'll be seeing around the entire box that you click from Google Earth. So I mark the box on the floor, and you walk it in the box on the floor. So as you roll, okay, I'm going to look at that structure. And then you come down and you're like, okay, I see the fire hydrant next to the blade of grass. And then you have to compensate for wind, because every time you pull vertical, if there's 10 knots of wind on you, you move 100 meters. So now you have to calculate in the wind. And then, of course, you have to figure out your altitudes. I'm going to start at this altitude and finish at this altitude.
So you're doing calculations up to the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they change the direction of the wind in which way you're going to fly, you have 20 minutes that you have essentially to basically take everything you did the night before and flip it.
That's incredible. And this
And
one is
you
just
can,
sort of mind blowing, just because
you can
there's
see
so
the
much.
level of detail that I hand write every little thing, and then I can start to figure out like where my deficiencies are, what I need to be looking at, what am I thinking about, where do I have to preload? Because if you have 3 big pushes, you're brain dead. So you have to know if you push up and you have a 3/4 flick, then you have to push again and then push again, and it's a 1/4, 3/4 roll. You have to have that kind of preloaded in your brain, because by the time you get to that 3rd push, you're lucky if you can figure out what right side up and upside down is.
Yeah, that's incredible. You can obviously tell this is architect handwriting.
Yeah. These are some cool shots out in the
Yeah, these are some great shots. I'll flip through these, but to no disservice to you, because we're going to get to this video here.
Yeah, so the video so one of the flights that you fly is a freestyle. So you can put it into music. You're allowed to add music and smoke, which for the bass stuff you can't.
All right, so I'll just kick this off. We won't watch all 4 minutes here, but I want the viewers to be able to get a sense of, there's a couple of times which I'll highlight here, which is effectively, this isn't quite that, but it's almost like you're in a free fall.
Yeah, and again, this particular type of sequence, you're trying to show your artistic ability with the airplane. And then you also want to show the capabilities of the airplane.
So this is all within the 1,000-meter box.
Correct. Yeah. So like that pole was probably a 10.5 G pole. And you can see how fast it rotates.
I was blown away at how fast this plane bobs and weaves. I mean, it is rotation, but it's more than rotation. It's 360 degrees. This is what I was referring to, where for those who aren't watching, it's you climb to the sky and then it looks like your engine just cuts out.
Yeah. So, you want to show all the capabilities of the airplane. Airplane's no different than a hammer. It doesn't know what it's doing. You are the only one that knows if you're upside down or right side up.
Now, is this something that's as normal as walking for you? Or are you still...
Yeah, now I don't even think about it. Yeah, I don't think about it and I don't feel it.
And is this freestyle right now? Or are you
Yeah,
performing?
this is just freestyle. So that's kind of the fun part about it, is there's an artistic piece to it. So you have the precision piece and the artistic piece. This is kind of more you get to have fun with it, put it to music. You can kind of just do whatever you want to do, and they're scoring you on all of this.
You have to have a lot of trust in your engineers and the actual plane itself.
What you want to do is not have something break.
Yeah, I would imagine. This is incredible. It's almost impervious to gravity, it looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because we got multiple GoPros, so you're seeing multiple angles from like what I see versus what you see.
And how long are these sequences typically for the freestyle than the actual set sequence?
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 minutes.
And your heart rate's 115 here.
Yeah, I mean, it's this part's fun. This is when you take a breath and it's kind of like you can just do what you want to do and have fun with it.
Have you lost the butterflies in your stomach? Is that even a thing for you anymore?
When it comes to the world level stuff, no. I think just because there's so many people watching that you don't want to, and you've got teammates, you don't want to disappoint the teammates.
How is it scored among the team? Is it just an aggregate score among all of you?
Yeah, they take the top 3 guys on the team, and that becomes a team score.
And these are countries, but like, is there a board that appoints or elects who's
there
going to go?
It's called SIVA, which is what it stands for, and essentially it's a world board that controls all the world contests. And for me, You have world and regional, and the world stuff is where I'm focused on, it's where I've been focused on. I always wanted to,
Kill a
obviously,
shot.
this was before I wore a helmet. Uh, that was quite the experience when I filleted my head.
So you wear a helmet now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
After that,
this
I'm
side of
sure
my
your
head
family's
peeled
not today.
back
Oh.
when I put my head through the canopy.
We sort of glossed over that. Can you break down a little bit more about that event, and then we can move on to
Yeah. So I was out practicing. Coach was on the ground, came in, and I was working on unknown figures to put into the sequences. So you're basically trying to screw all the other people and do figures that no one for sure has practiced. So it was a down, what they call a down Humpty. So essentially 45 a radius and 45 up. So I pushed down. It was a 4 of 8. So now I'm inverted, and you have to push all the way around back to the 45. And when I pushed so hard, one of the ratchets was not 100% closed on the seatbelt, and so I had 9 times 220 pounds sucking me through, and my head went through the canopy, sliced this open. That's when it was like running into a wall. Don't remember anything after that, but apparently I was, I came up, I was upright, and the guy on the ground thought I lost a control surface because I kept doing this with the airplane. And the remaining part, one of the shards was still in, and I couldn't get it out, and everything was getting bloody inside. And, once air hits like oil or blood, it goes everywhere. Anyway, fast forward, I get my head out, and he says, okay, go back and land. Went back, landed. I don't remember any of this. Came back, landed, got out of the plane, and I was like, and when you start to taste that saltiness, something's really bad. And I looked in, and it was like white, the white bubbles that are right on I knew I got all the way down to my scalp, but I completely filleted it.
I have to ask, I mean, how do you go back? How do you, I think of somebody who got bit by a shark going back out to go surf. It's like there's not more than mental fortitude. It might be some maybe mentally unwell, if I'm being honest. But how do you come back to these?
Mentally unwell. The harder part is you just lost a buddy. He just went in, and you've got to fly. And the big push on it is you need to, the 48 hours is kind of the witching hour. You need to just get in and go fly. And if you're not going to, you're probably done. And I always said, if I get to the plane and I open the canopy, like I'm going to know when I'm done, because I'm going to start to be afraid. And as soon as you're afraid, all those brain cells are going to be in that flight mode versus fight, and then you're done.
How do you discern between not being afraid and hubris?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I don't ever think about it when I fly. It would be like me getting in my car and going down the road. Like I don't, it's aviation is the safest transportation anywhere ever, and the stuff we're doing, we're the best trained pilots in the world. So if you know that you're one of the best at doing what you do, and you don't think about it. Like I don't think, hey, I'm going to go up, and the bigger thing is you're going to hit a bird or something you can't control, but you know how to get yourself mentally prepared. You know how much sleep you need. You know where your electrolytes need to be. You pattern it just like any other sport. And then you don't think about it. What you'd think about is executing the job. And it's hard enough just to do that.
So I'm going to take this in transition. So something you mentioned was effectively momentum is sort of getting back out there. And I want to take you back to being in New York, determining whether or not to go to a trade school or college. We'll fast forward into Wolcott, but I want to start there. You're from Long Island, Suffolk County, right?
Long Island, baby.
So I have through my wife, I have a much better understanding of Long Island, especially that area. It's a blue collar area.
Yep.
I also grew up in a blue collar city, and I'm just curious, looking back on it, what your take is relative to going to the trade school in hindsight, and was that the right decision to go to college? How do you push through, and how you've continued to fight, for lack of a better word, to persist in? You've achieved quite a bit. It could be very easy to sit on your laurels. What keeps you, as the sky junkie name you've earned, what keeps you pushing in that regard?
So I grew up in a blue collar family. My dad was a contractor, plumber, and the whole thing was you don't need college. That was that era. And my mom was hell bent on you're going to college because a lot of our family has not, and you're going to be someone. And I was like, I don't know. I kind of dig this construction thing. And then I started to about 14 open my eyes and go, these architects are terrible. If they'd figured this stuff out and drew it right, we wouldn't be framing it wrong. And at that point, now I'm going to date myself. They'd show up in their penny loafers, where you remember the loafers where you stick the penny in, and their khakis and their golf shirts, and I'd be like, wow, like I want to be that. And then I got lucky through one of the contractors I was working for, introduced me to a New York company that was doing some more architect company, and went to school. I ended up finishing my 5-year program in 4. So I had a lot of time on my hands on my 5th year during my thesis to work. And I've always liked to have money in my pocket. My buddies never did. And it was nice to be like, oh, let's go, go out and get some beer and hang out, and like, oh, I got money, right? And I got a car and I got some cool stuff. Fast forward, I start working in the city. I did a lot of work in the Twin Towers. We were one of the architects that were permitted to work in them. Worked in the city for a while, and then I was asked to come out and do a project out here. Came out, and at that time, it was February, and it was cold in New York, and I was going down Hollywood Boulevard in like a Mustang, I think, with a convertible, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I want to be here. Mind you, at the time, it was like $1,500 for 500 square feet apartment in Midtown. Out here for $1,500, I could be in Marina Del Rey on the beach. So came out, rented some space from John at the time, and then it came a point where I was like, I either have to go back and start a company in New York, or I'm going to stay here and try to plant my roots.
How old are you at this point?
Let's see, it was 97, 98. So I don't know, I was probably late 20s. And I of course had no money, right? So I was like working late, doing it. And he's like, well, why don't we just work something out? Then you buy the company and then you go from there. Then you don't have to start. The company already has been around for a while. And I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, I'm trying to like develop business and relationships because I didn't know a lot of people out here. So I was down in Venice Beach, and I'm looking at first of all, I'm looking at the windows in of the houses, and I'm like, man, they're so dirty. And then I just sort of packed that in the back of my head. And then I was like, I got to figure out a way to make money because I have to buy the first piece of stock if I'm going to buy this company. So mind you, this is the late 90s. I'm like, all right, I'm going to create a company called Green Clean. Green meaning money, not environmentally friendly, all the other stuff. And this thing took off, and it became, so I was daytime architect and daytime receptionist for a cleaning business that I started, and grew that, and then started to say, started to think about the Venice thing, like, hey, it doesn't take much, but a bucket, a squeegee, a ladder, and you can get a bunch of people that can clean windows, and you can have it more on a repetitive basis as opposed to just one-offs. And then I was lucky enough to have a company come and say, we'd like to buy your contacts essentially from you. And I'm like, that's cool. The assets were limited. And I was like, well, it just so happens that this is the number I need to make the stock. I didn't tell them that. And so they essentially made the stock number work for me because I paid for the first piece in that.
So you were going door to door, handing these flyers out. Like, how did you get this up and running?
So I would get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and the key is to hook someone in. It's kind of like now, I laugh that they put this on the TV now, where they say you get your first cleaning for $19.90 or whatever. And of course they hook you, and the cleanings aren't 19 something or $20, right? The cleanings are more like 40, but they hook you with that first time and you see how great they do and they go from there. I would put flyers on all the cars because I lived in the marina, in the Marine Point apartment, put flyers on all the cars. And so they'd wake up in the morning and see, we can get a cleaning for $30 or whatever. And it just started going and going and going.
It was more than just window washing. It was actual cleaning houses.
So it started out with apartment cleaning, and then that moved into the window thing because I was down at Venice and I'm like, the windows are dirty. Like, why doesn't someone have them on we'll do it twice a month for you for a number. And, then it became, and we want a 6-month commitment from you on it and then sell it. And then that, I took those you'll see in each piece, I take something I learned here and I apply it to the next. Yeah. So like our 501c3 subscription-based donations is better than one-time donations.
For sure.
So the lessons learned in one part of your life, if you apply them correctly to the next, it works really well, or it has worked well for me.
I think that's a pretty common thing, actually. A lot of young people probably, they think that if they find their passion, they're gonna find what they've always meant to be doing, and they'll have success. But I have found most people who found success are actually doers that end up revealing that path more so than it's been predefined.
Yeah, I mean, I always, it's exactly what you just said, right? You have people that think about great ideas, which is good, but if you don't act on it, and the issue with acting on it, and I came from nothing. So if I lose everything tomorrow, I just make it again. So and I've kept that attitude, like, all right, if this thing goes belly up now, obviously I have to be a little more conservative with a family, but sure. If you really fear, if you have no fear, and again, it's back to the flying thing. If you have no fear, you will succeed. It may take you a couple times, but you're going to get through it.
Well, you also mentioned something while you were flying about letting go, which is an interesting concept because I found in a lot of sports, right? I mean, you just take a golf swing, for example, the more clammed up you are, the less effective you're going to be at squaring up the ball. But it's a little bit counterintuitive to let go and give into that confidence. But that's something that happens, I think, through acquiring the skill set and doing it repeatedly and getting momentum, gaining some wins along the way. How did you, you couldn't have known that cleaning service business would have been as successful as it was, but you took a stab and you realized a common thing would be, hey, that seems like a great idea, but how am I going to find those people? You went out and found those people.
Yeah. I think number one, if I sit idle for any length of time, I go bananas.
Yeah.
When we have meetings in the office, the guys bring me that thing of sand with the rake. They bring me fidget toys because I'm like, and as I get older, it gets worse. Like if in the first 10 minutes we haven't accomplished something, or I'm done, like check out. So I think part of it is I need to be doing something all the time. Yeah. I think the other part is, and this comes from the part of removing yourself from the environment, the situation, like I talked about earlier. It's amazing how much you can see that needs to get done, right? Meaning in business, if you look at something and it's failing, because someone's not addressing it, there's an opportunity there to grow that into something. And, you know, if you look at any environment that you are in and you can pull yourself out and objectively look at everything around, you start to realize, okay, well, that's a problem. This is an issue. That's an issue. And so back to the flying thing, one of the things that we spend so much time on is a post basically review of what we did. So you have a you'll have we call it briefings. You'll have a pre-briefing, which establishes the goals, and it reminds you of the things that, you know, that you haven't done well, that you need to do well. And then you have a post-briefing. And if you take that into business, you know, I think two things come up in business that will allow you to consolidate this. Number one, when we meet with a client, first thing I say is, okay, we have 30 minutes or whatever the time limit is. Here are the 3 things I have to get out of this meeting. We're not leaving this room till I get those 3 things. And then everything else falls into place under that, you know, because especially when you're in a meeting in a professional situation, you know, the conversations, people like to hear themselves talk, they go all over the place, but they don't stay on point. And one of the things about flying is if you're not on point, you're dead.
Yeah.
So
the distillation of what's important.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to know. I mean, if I come away with anything, you know, if I were to summarize the last, call it 10 years, is you have to be able to pull yourself out of the situation so there's no emotion. So then you get clarity, right? The second thing is you have to be efficient with the time that you have. I saw on an Instagram, you know, and we've all probably seen it with the tape measure, and the guy who's 65, he's like, he takes the tape and he holds it at like, I think I'm going to be 75. He cuts it at 65 and he goes, that's all I have left. And I'm going to live this like I'm on steroids. Yeah. And once you get that concept in your head, like every minute I spend doing something I don't like to do, I'm not good at, I'm never getting that time back. And it's super important. And that's where the flying thing to me balances me out. That's where the coming up with different ideas on businesses, which has led me to where we are now. It's all been based on, I only have this much time. And with flying, of course, I've shortened that, right? Because tomorrow could be my last day when I fly, that you just come at things very differently. Your headspace is very different.
How has that influenced your Figure One Foundation?
You know, so you'll appreciate this. We're a buddy of mine and I are out at a bar and we're throwing darts and it was raining out. So we couldn't fly or else we would have been flying. So we're having a couple beers and he's like, you know, we got to come up with something to give back to the aviation community. It's been great for us. So I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't know. We got to do something with like kids to get them pilot's license and move them all on, like kids that would never have this opportunity. So, okay, well, what's out there that does that? What we realized was not a lot. So I said, well, why don't we call it Figure One? Like, and the symbol is the symbol when you dive into the box, you're in an aerobatic sequence. It's the first figure, hence Figure One. So he's like, oh, that's cool. And we're sketching on a napkin. And then he's like, well, we need money, right? We can't give away money we don't have. I'm like, okay, here's a list of 20 that we can get money from right away. We can start it. So we're going through this whole thing. So he's like, okay, cool. And I said, look, I'll have my guys build a website, do all this. Literally within a week, we had this whole thing together. Then we had to file for the 501c3. So we did a short form. You know, there's a short form, long form. We did the short form just to get it going. Because now I had people saying, okay, I'll give you money, but we couldn't take it until we had the number. So anyway, this is funny because we get about 6 months in and now we're starting to get, you know, people are interested and they're like, well, we love what you're doing, but how do we donate? And he looked at me and both of us looked at each other. Our heads exploded. He goes, dude, we don't have a donate page on our website. I'm like, no, donate page. We need that. So that's literally how it came about. And it was, I mean, it's really cool. And now I'm starting.
What have you guys been able to do? You've been around for several years now.
9, I think this will be year 10. So a lot of kids, and where it comes out, we had a kid who actually trained with us. We can train anywhere in the U.S. and we pay for it. We pay, the scholarship pays for it. But he came and super young and with his dad, and he sent me a picture of him and his dad next to one of the planes. COVID comes, his dad passes away. He has a boy. So he's got his boy where he is and he where his dad is in a picture. But instead of it being a small aviation plane, it's a 737 for Southwest.
Wow.
And he sent it. And he goes, this would have never been my path in life if it wasn't for you guys. So that's where you incredible. Just go. That, it hits you.
Well, I know we're coming up on time. I could talk to you for hours, man. I really appreciate you coming in here and sharing your story this way. There's a lot more paths I'd love to dive into, maybe on another round. But is there any closing thoughts that you think I might not have addressed?
No, I just think what you're doing is fantastic. I think this is so cool. It's a different perspective. There's a lot of these podcasts, just in looking at the stuff you're doing, a lot of the podcasts are driven for a purpose. Yours is all information, in different walks of life information. And I really, not to blow smoke up your ass, but I think it's awesome. And I wish there was more of this out there because, you can get people that are viewing these podcasts and you can take snippets of all different things and take it and apply it to your business, your personal, everything. Sure. And I dig it, man. I'm super pumped for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for being on. And I'm very grateful for your support. So we'll talk soon.
All right, brother. See you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For a detailed list of episodes and show notes, visit scalesofsuccesspodcast.com. If you found this conversation engaging, consider signing up for our newsletter, where we go even deeper on a weekly basis, sharing exclusive insights and actionable strategies that can help you in your own journey. We'd also appreciate if you subscribed, rated, or shared today's episode. It helps us to attract more illuminating guests, adding to the list of enlightening conversations we've had with New York Times bestsellers, producers, founders, CEOs, congressmen, and other independent thinkers who are challenging the status quo. You can also follow us for updates, extra content, and more insights from our guests. We hope to have you back again next week for another episode of Scales of Success. Scales of Success is an Edge West Capital production.